In my opinion, the Jehovah's Witnesses continue to be a destructive authoritarian organization. They still have practices such as their encouragement of their members not to have blood transfusions, which results in deaths every year. But today, if you leave the witnesses, and about 50% of the young people that are raised witnesses will eventually leave, you may be cut off by your family. And they have a practice called disfellowshipping or shunning. And if you leave and they announce that you have been disfellowshipped, your family may shun you.
Me and my wife went to this restaurant. There was just a weird vibe in there.
Was it called the Yellow Deli?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the 12 tribes. It was originally a group started by a guy by the name of Gene Spriggs in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they believe that they are the chosen new Israel, and their leader is the prophet. Well, Gene Spriggs died rich, but his people would flip real estate for him. And this would be the way that Gene Spriggs made money, because these people would work for basically nothing but room and board. Whenever you go to a Yellow Deli, whenever you have one of their mates, you are contributing to the 12 tribes cult. Jim Jones knew this is the end. He was right. The authorities were coming. And so he mixed these tubs of punch, and they were laced with cyanide. And he insisted that all of his people take the cyanide. The expression, "you drank the Kool-Aid," is an allusion to Jonestown and the idea that you're brainwashed. Many of the people in Jonestown were forced to drink the Kool-Aid. The children, they were all murdered. There were people that were shot that were trying to run away. So it was a massacre, and almost 1,000 people died in one day, and that was Jonestown. If you think that somehow you're invincible, you're the one person that is not persuadable, that nothing can persuade you, you are not recognizing your own vulnerability to the extent that you have made yourself more vulnerable to a cult group. I mean, look, there would be no advertising or negative political ads if people were not persuadable. So what these groups do is they create a kind of synthesis of coercive persuasion, thought reform, understood influence techniques that they knowingly use, and they focus it like a laser on someone. Scientology would be a group that I would be concerned about. I think it's a very difficult organization for people to leave. There's a policy called disconnection. They declare someone as what they call a suppressive person, and then you are to disconnect from them, which means it's over. You have nothing to do with them.
I've heard a lot of rumors about people that have tried to escape this, that have been blocked away. Is that true?
They will isolate a person and monitor them during a period of time which they believe will resolve their problem. This happens with certain situations with Scientology, and people may not get the help that they need. What happened within NXIVM was what happens with a lot of totalitarian cults. Raniere, like many of the cult leaders I've dealt with, just gets worse. He sexually exploited women in the group, and then this escalated until in the end, he created a kind of secret society, a cult within a cult, that were sex slaves. And these women would be branded with a cauterizing iron, with no anesthetic. It would take as long as 30 minutes or more. That would be incredibly painful, but this would be endured as a sign of, empowerment, supposedly. And in their pelvis would be engraved what later was understood to be his initials. And it was that was finally the tipping point. The most terrible situation I ever dealt with, where a parent gave up a child, was Carrie Jewell. When she was 10 years old, her mother gave her to David Koresh, the leader of the Waco Davidians, and he raped her. This woman, I'm sure, was a loving mother, but she was so programmed. She thought that giving her child to the Messiah was a godly thing to do. And they were told that he was planting the seed of David in these victims. And I think one of the reasons why he did not surrender was he knew that when they did DNA testing, they would establish that he was a pedophile and that he had sex with minor children and that they had children when they were children.
Oh, man.
This is the nucleus for the definition of a destructive cult, which is number one, an absolute totalitarian leader that becomes an object of worship, that is the defining element and driving force of the group. And two, that leader knowingly uses thought reform and coercive persuasion to gain undue influence over his followers. And then three, that leader uses the undue influence that he possesses to exploit and do harm to his followers. And you take those three things together, and I don't care what the name of the group is and what they say they believe, that is simply the window dressing, the facade. Beyond that mask are those three core characteristics. There's even a group led by Robert Shen that is nicknamed the TikTok cult, because his followers, dancers and entertainers, do very popular videos on TikTok. Shin makes money from these people, and they live in group housing. And there's a documentary now on Netflix in which they allege that this is a cult group, that they manipulate and control their members, and that they cause families to be cut off. You know, there are just so many of these groups, it's hard to keep track of them. When people leave destructive cults, many times they have not sorted things out, and they feel there's something wrong with me. I couldn't hack it. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't loyal enough. Very similar to people in abusive, controlling relationships, looking at themselves and saying, look, it's really my fault what happened, instead of looking at the person who was an abusive, controlling partner or the organization that was abusive and controlling, and recognizing that they were to blame and that the person who was hurt is really a victim. So for people leaving cults, it's a process of sorting it out, of deprogramming themselves.
Wow.